tourism is one of the fastest growing sectors globally. To this end, cemetery tourism is a unique phenomenon. Generally, the classification of cemeteries as part of dark tourism is common as they are related to death, disasters, or sufferings. While there are many who reject cemetery tourism for various reasons such as the perspective of jeopardizing the peace and preservation of burial sites, cemeteries serve as historical archives for the community, so it is important to protect them for future generations. The correlation between tourism and death is regularly revisited in tourism studies and management, especially in Europe, America, and several parts of Asia. Even the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, has recognized cemeteries as tourism sites, in particular Taj Mahal in New Delhi, the pyramids in Egypt, Hollywood Forever in Los Angeles, and Glasnevin in Ireland. These sites have become hugely popular tourism designations. In the Japanese case, the Tomaten Royal Mausoleum in Okinawa has become a tourist attraction. Conversely, the existence of Japanese cemeteries overseas has yet to be explored, especially in Malaysia. Although cemetery sites in Malaysia are still not considered as tourist attractions, however, the potential in cemetery tourism is enormous, as seen in other countries. Since the interest in learning and understanding about past events is very similar to tourists participating in heritage or cultural tourism, we believe that Japanese cemeteries in Malaysia have the potential to be promoted as tourism sites. Hence, as an example, Japanese cemeteries in Sarawak have the potential of becoming attractions especially to Japanese nationals. The Malaysian tourism sector will benefit in terms of diversification by encouraging Japanese nationals to visit cemeteries that depict Japanese influences, identity, and contributions to Sarawak. One indication that gives hope that Japanese nationals would be interested in visiting such sites is the fact that a small Japanese cemetery located in Bukit Baru in the state of Malacca receives Japanese tourists living locally and from Japan. This particular cemetery is interesting as it is a gravesite of mostly ordinary Japanese nationals who lived in Malacca between 1911 and 1941. It is believed that the dead include Japanese migrants who came to make a living in various businesses in the state of Malacca, which was an important trading hub. Interestingly, some graves also belong to Japanese women from the Emakasakagun in Kyushu who ended up working as prostitutes or karayuki-san. These fascinating details taken together might readily draw history buffs to other similar sites. As the target audience would be Japanese nationals, the significance of visiting cemeteries in the Japanese culture cannot be understated. Cemeteries play an important part in ancestral worship in Japanese culture. One of the interesting features of Japanese culture is the Obon Festival, a Buddhist tradition praying for the souls of deceased ancestors, celebrated in the month of August. The Obon Festival provides a window to the importance of cemeteries in the Japanese mindset. Using this as an indicator, we expect that Japanese families who have ties to Sarawak, as well as those interested to know more about Japanese influences in the state, could then be targeted as potential tourists. Promoting Japanese cemeteries as tourist sites in Sarawak will not only showcase the rich multicultural heritage of the state, but would also allow Japanese nationals a window to past Japanese migrants who sacrificed much to attain a better life, beginning from the Meiji period, 1868 until 1912, onwards. In Malaysia, where graves are always associated with ghosts and all sorts of scary things, the effort to transform cemeteries into a tourism spot can counteract such negative connotations as well as provide a chance for the younger generation to appreciate their past historical linkages with Japan. Throughout the Brooke administration, between 1841 and 1946, a large number of Japanese people immigrated to Sarawak. The phenomenon of the early arrival of the community is normally associated with the presence of prostitutes or karayuki-san. This is evidenced by the gravestones of those buried in Sarawak as early as the Meiji period. These women originated from poor families. The journeys endured by these women differs from one to another, and many were sent all over Southeast Asia. The Karayuki-san migrated to Sarawak together with other ethnic immigrants from elsewhere. Bob Rees argues that Japanese brothels were famous as Chinese coolies were their main customers. Rees pointed out that those coolies who had no hope of ever marrying sought out Japanese prostitutes for female company. Many remained in Borneo, especially in prosperous towns like Miri. However, there were some Karayuki-san who returned home to Japan under the 1920 Singapore repatriation policy, introduced by Deputy Consul Yamasaki Hikachi in cooperation with the British authorities. Eventually, the Japanese community in Sarawak consisted of more than the Karayuki-san, as other Japanese migrants continued to thrive economically and became assimilated with the local community. In the early periods of migration into Sarawak, Japanese community came into the state in smaller groups, mostly from the lower income group. By the first decade of the 20th century, wealthier Japanese groups began to arrive, such as from Nissha Shokai Jurigaisha, a well-known trading company in Japan. The company bought land from the Brooke government in Samarahan, aiming to plant rubber. Early groups were mostly made up of farmers and planters, but as the community grew, more professionals joined them to provide much-needed services to a burgeoning population. These professions included dentists, doctors, and retail store owners. The Japanese community was tiny, diverse in terms of occupation, but well organized. Laundries, photo studios, food stands, and a few retail stores were run by Japanese immigrants in Kuching. Several Japanese vegetable and rubber producers also relocated outside the town, while a few doctors and dentists lived in the bazaar. Though Nissha Shokai was prominently involved in Sarawak's economy, other Japanese were very enterprising. Japanese bookies, gamblers, and peddlers who were familiar with the rural area established tiny shops in strategic locations, bought inexpensive Japanese-made products from larger Japanese shop owners in port towns on credit, and sold them back to the locals. Some who had made a living by providing services to Japanese prostitutes also relocated to the countryside and established businesses. Bigger store owners started working in the import-export industry. Major Japanese corporations established branches in significant urban areas. Japanese banks and transportation firms created branch offices and agencies to facilitate the new economy. Many entrepreneurs like Kiichi Hayashi, Kiyoshi Yada, and Kagoi Fujino began operating a variety of businesses. Graduates Kiyoshi Yada and Kagoi Fujino from a commercial school who learned Malay opened a store to sell diverse Japanese goods by 1910. With a growing Japanese population, by 1901, the government of Sarawak allotted a burial ground of the edge of town after receiving an application from the Japanese community in Kuching due to the increasing number of their presence. The gravestone commemorating the earliest death dated May 28, 1902 belongs to Kobayashi Taro, who also went by the Buddhist religious name of Sayaku Zasho. The last burial that took place at the cemetery in 1944 was Noro Mazamichi, a soldier who died during the Japanese occupation of Sarawak in March 1944. In the cemetery are buried several young women who are believed to be Karayuki, whose gravestones show they died in the Meiji period. The location and surroundings of the Japanese cemetery in the 1940s was clearly illustrated by Nobuo Iwanaga, a Japanese civilian attached to the military, and Aki Takata of the Red Cross, who were on the staff of the Lintang prisoner of war camp near Kuching. As an example, Japanese cemeteries in Sarawak are located at Badalintong, Kuching, in the city of Samarahan known as the Yorioka Shrine by the local Japanese, as well as at the one in Tanjung Lobang in Miri. Others were discovered later at an estate in Siniawan and in the vicinity of Sirkala Korbungsan Nayu, in Kota Samarahan. When World War II ended in 1945, all Japanese nationals, both military personnel and civilians, were repatriated to Japan, with the exception of first degree of prisoners of war, a few locally born or permitted to stay, and the cemetery came to disuse until normal relations between Sarawak and Japan were resumed later. The maintenance of the graveyard at Badalintong is voluntarily carried out by the Sarawak Japan Club, which was resuscitated from a pre-war club. At present, the Japanese consulate in Sabah is responsible for its upkeep, but the actual work is delegated to an official of the Japan Club of Kuching. The Japanese cemeteries have now become an integral part of Sarawak. They are of cultural, historical, and identity-related symbols. The potential for tourist attraction in this segment is the creativity to be packaged together with historical migration of Japanese to Sarawak and its economic activities. The digital age has opened new opportunities for presenting and accessing historical information and cultural heritage, and open up opportunities to visit virtually many historical sites that are remote and difficult to access. New ways of exploring virtual tourism are emerging that are gaining more and more attention with the advancement of the fifth generation or 5G technology and information communication technology that sped up information to be shared online easily. Japanese cemetery sites in Sarawak could be visited virtually and could be part of the learning and teaching of history in school through technology-mediated tools. As tourism will be associated with the speed and acceleration distribution of information, Government of Sarawak can work closely with the federal government as well as the technology provider to acquire 5G technology to be installed in the state. Therefore, virtual reality offers a potential solution to enable visiting inaccessible cultural and historical heritage sites. Apart from that, tourism organizations like the Sarawak Tourism Board could start using guidebooks and guided tours to raise the profile of cemetery sites and using their collective strength to support stakeholders in conserving and developing the material aspects of the targeted site. Important historical and cemetery sites like in Sarawak should consider cemetery tours on regular basis, establish an information center with brochures, souvenirs, coffee shop, and planning for extensive marketing activities to increase their attractiveness as a cultural and historical importance. In this sense, the board could also work in sync with the Japanese Embassy and Japan agencies or entities associated with the Japanese community in Sarawak. Regionally, Japanese cemetery tourism packages from Malaysia should be promoted under ASEAN Tourism Year, where Japanese visiting Southeast Asia are aware of them. With the number of Japanese cemeteries found in all ASEAN countries, these packages might be useful as some Japanese family members were buried in Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, and some other states. Therefore, under the ASEAN plans, Japanese can connect and trace their ancestors in Southeast Asia. Finally, long-term Japanese residents in Sarawak should also be included in complementing efforts to showcase the Japanese cemeteries. For example, Madam Sakai Kazui, who runs a travel agency, who is a resident of Sarawak, possesses a lot of information about Japanese graves, which is valuable to producing a tour package that is interesting, substantial, as well as attractive enough for Japanese tourists in particular. The physical setting of the cemeteries provides the Japanese with a platform to sustain and support Japanese memory, values, national treasures, and symbols of national identity. Therefore, the commercialization of Japanese cemeteries would fit the consumption needs of Japanese nationals who yearn to reconnect with their heritage and Japanese historical significance in Southeast Asia. More importantly, while attracting Japanese visitors to Malaysia, this type of sustainable tourism helps preserve and promote local knowledge and culture.